Well, welcome to everybody who is watching this conversation. I'm delighted to have as my guest on this conversation with the wise insights and practices for difficult times, a dear friend of mine, Linda Graham, who is quite a voice that inspires many people these days in getting through hard times. First, let me just give people a chance to see you. So, hi, Linda.
Hello, James. Hello, everyone.
Lovely. And let me just say a few things about Linda in case you don't know her or aren't familiar with her. She is a licensed psychotherapist in the San Francisco Bay Area, a dedicated practitioner of insight meditation, and teaches mindful self-compassion at Spirit Rock, where I teach, and other places. And she does trainings in the US and abroad about mindful self-compassion, and also teaches practices that bring together mindfulness, relational psychology, and modern neuroscience. And she's written a book that has been very successful and has really impacted many people in a positive way, called Bouncing Back on Resilience. And she has a new book coming out in September of this year called The Resilience Toolkit. So, Linda, it's really great to be here with you.
James, it's always wonderful to be with you. Thank you.
Nice. So, as you know, on these conversations, the reason I started them was because, first, for my own benefit, wanted to hear what people whose wisdom I really respect, how they are using their own practices and all the work they've done in their life to hold these crazy times that we're living in. I don't have to go into all the craziness. You just pick up the newspaper each day and can have your jaw drop and say, "Oh, I thought we had hit the low, and there's a new low." And it's both scary and can be cause for discouragement, but can also be used to deepen our understanding and perhaps hold a perspective that can be helpful as we move through these times. So I want to ask you what I have asked most of the guests on this series. If you could share your wisest perspective that helps you hold these current chaotic times, so uncertain, filled with so much fear and divisiveness and insecurity. How do you hold it in your mind so you don't get completely overwhelmed with discouragement and despair?
Well, I'll start with this. When 9/11 happened, I called you because I wanted your guidance on how to hold so much fear and uncertainty and the feeling the rug had been pulled out. And what you suggested was to change perspective from the present moment fears temporarily to either a micro perspective, looking at the beauty of one flower, or one moment petting my cat, or one hug from a friend, or one cup of warm tea. Getting the micro perspective of the tremendous beauty and magnificence of our world, or zooming out to the very, very large perspective. So there was 9/11, and that was that moment, and there was New York and those days and weeks, and there was our country and the months and years, and there's our planet and all the millennia, and there's the solar system and billions of years. And to zoom out to the vast, vast spaciousness that holds it all, because it does. So that's what I practiced doing, was being able to change my perspective in the moment. And what I learned, the deeper lesson that I learned, is that I have a choice. I can choose what I focus my attention on. I can choose how I'm responding. And I put a couple of quotes together about that. One from my friend, Janet Friedman, who says, catch the moment, make a choice. And then from your friend, Julia Butterfly Hill, who says, every moment has a choice and every choice has an impact. So I put those together, right? Catch the moment, make a choice. Every moment has a choice. Every choice has an impact. So I really pay attention to what I'm paying attention to, how I'm responding. Am I really managing my own anxiety, my own reactivity, my own reactions to things? And I also teach the perspective from my colleague, Frankie Perez, who says, how you respond to the issue is the issue. So now I teach resilience. I teach at Spirit Rock. I teach facing the mess we're in with compassion, clarity, and courage. And there's another part of the perspective, I think, and that is that as we practice mindfulness and we experience awareness, and we experience the awareness that can hold anything. Awareness holds any content. So we focus our attention on our body sensations, on our emotions, on our cascades of emotions, on our thoughts, on our patterns of thoughts, even on entire belief systems. But the awareness can hold any of that. I remember your teaching. I've heard this many times. The awareness that is aware of fear is not itself afraid. And so dropping back into that larger awareness. And there's a similarity with resilience, because resilience is also a process that meets any stressor, any trigger, any trauma. So the exciting research that's being done in the field now about resilience is that people can experience all kinds of trauma. A car accident, the death of a child, being in combat, being in prison or a prisoner of war, the death of trust in our government. We can experience this kind of existential dread, and yet people find ways to respond, to dissolve the fear. Yesterday, on my way to something else, I came across this quote by William James, and I knew I was talking to you today, so I copied it out, and here it is.
Okay.
The world we see that seems so insane is the result of a belief system that is not working. To perceive the world differently, we must be willing to change our belief system, let the past slip away, expand our sense of now, and dissolve the fear in our minds. So I spend a lot of time trying to manage and dissolve the fear in my mind. And then I also really try to pay attention, because now we know that our fears are being deliberately manipulated. Mm-hmm. And we know that we have fight, flight, freeze, collapse response in our nervous system that's hardwired in by evolution. And we know we have a negativity bias also hardwired in by evolution to pay more attention to the negative and the dangerous than we do to the positive and the safe. And we have an us versus them bias that's built in by evolution to know very, very quickly who's kin and who's not kin. And so those instincts deeply embedded in our biology, in our neurobiology, are being manipulated. And so the anger and the fear and the hostility and the hatred is being stirred up all of the time. And so to really pay attention to how caught we are in that, and then to do our practices that help bring us back to some calm, to some equanimity, what's called the range of resilience, so that from there we actually can see clearly and make some wise choices. So those are...
That's very, very full, comprehensive answer, and I'm glad to hear the comments that I mentioned to you those years ago, I like that. I've got to start using that again. So I want to just follow up. Here you are, written one book and coming out with a second book on resilience. When you get activated, and there it is, and you can't catch it with mindfulness because already the system has gotten activated.
Yeah.
And the hormones are running through your body, and there is a feeling of tension or worry or that contraction. What practices do you do, and that you recommend that others use in just a very practical way? What would you suggest that people do?
Well, I have several, and I can begin very, very simple and then expand out to bigger and bigger practices. But years ago, just intuitively, I began putting my hand on my heart whenever I got a startle response, because I learned that calms down the startle response. And so now I teach that as a hand on the heart exercise. Very, very simple, hand on the heart. Breathing deeply into the heart center, breathing a sense of ease and goodness and peace into the heart center. And then remembering a moment, just one moment of feeling safe and loved and cherished with another human being. And letting that feeling, when we have felt safe with another human being, wash through the body and bring some calm to the entire nervous system, which it does. That technique is powerful enough to calm down a panic attack in less than a minute. So I teach that a lot. That or something similar has now been incorporated into mindful self-compassion, which I also teach with your wife, Jane, at Spirit Rock, which is such a joy. And the whole mindful self-compassion protocol is to interrupt the automaticity of our startle response, of our shame response, of our fear or our anger response, and just to interrupt it. Put the hand on the heart. Gee, this is hard.
Maybe you could lead us through it. Just lead, okay. Since you're going for it and people are watching, they can just learn it in real time.
So at the first physical sign of distress, the first moment of feeling jarred or feeling a disturbance in the force field, hand on the heart or hand on the cheek. I know you teach that, James. Hand on the heart, and then recognizing, ouch, this hurts, this is hard, this sucks, this particular moment, I'm not happy, I'm frightened, I'm angry, whatever's going on. And then beginning to say the phrases. There are traditional phrases that are taught, they work for me, but people can use their own phrases as well. May I be kind to myself in this moment. And that right there interrupts whatever thoughts we might be having. May I be kind to myself in this moment. And I've since adapted the practice. When I do it, I say, may I be kind to myself in any moment. May I be kind to myself in every moment. Then may I accept this moment exactly as it is, which is our mindfulness. May I accept myself exactly as I am in this moment. So even when I'm losing it, I'm scared, I'm yelling at people, may I accept myself exactly as I am in this moment, because that self-acceptance is what shifts the functioning of the brain. May I give myself all the compassion and courageous action that I need. So we know that a compassion practice of any positive pro-social emotion practice shifts the functioning of the brain. It's powerful to know that. It shifts us out of that negativity bias, out of contraction and reactivity and a kind of hypervigilance, into more openness and receptivity, out to the bigger picture again, out to more optimism. And the direct, measurable outcome of doing a practice like compassion is resilience. I mean, I just love that. The direct outcome of doing these practices is resilience. We open up to the larger perspective again and can make some wise choices. So I teach that practice. And then to keep going, one of my major practices is to spend time in nature. And I'm blessed to live where I can spend time in nature. But there's another quote from John Baraz who says, I go to nature to be soothed and healed and to have my senses put in order. And I think that's what happens in nature, because we are nature. That's our biology. And so when we get frightened and in despair, to take a moment to go out to a place that really is a manifestation of the sacred and the vast and the larger being that holds us. And there's a couple of other practices I do. One is gratitude practice, which I probably learned early on from you. Thank you very much. Because any moment that I'm alive, I'm grateful for being alive. I get to deal. Whatever is going on, I am here to deal with it. And Bob Emmons, who pioneered a lot of the research about gratitude at UC Davis, teaches rather to shift from taking our lives for granted and taking them as granted. Every moment is a gift. Every moment has a choice. And so I really practice that. I'm alive, whatever's happening, whatever I have to get through next, I get to get through it. And I know you teach that too, changing a have to a get to. Mm-hmm. I get to deal with this. Mm-hmm. And then probably the largest, one of the largest perspectives is the importance of trying to learn from whatever's going on, however well or poorly I'm doing, or well or poorly other people are doing. What can I learn here? And this, in this day and age, we kind of tease ourselves, about AFCO is another frickin' growth opportunity. But there's some real truth to that. Anytime I'm alive and I'm learning, that means I'm coping. And so I look at, what am I doing? Is it working? Can I do something differently? What are other people doing? Is that working? And so I really focus on the possibilities. I'm alive, I get to, and I focus on the possibilities of what can happen. So that's how I keep hand on the heart all the way out to what do we do next?
Mm-hmm. Wow, lovely. So many good techniques and approaches. So when you read the news, and I know that you like to stay informed, and you read the news each day, or however often you read it. How do you process the information?
I'm going to say something a little differently here, probably. It's important to be informed. It's also important to protect our brain and our mind and our hearts from the bombardment of information or pseudo-information or false information that we're subject to. And long before the current administration, Barbara Fredrickson, in her book Positivity, suggested being careful about your media diet. Monitor how much time you spend watching the evening news, or do you get your news from other sources that are a little slower and more calming to the mind? And here's what I'm going to say that might be a little different. We've had a revolution in our society in the last many decades. It's a digital technology revolution. And even though the amount of information and the amount of communication and how easy it is to connect, here we are talking by Zoom, right? We're using the technology to do this. But as fabulous and efficient and life-saving even as it is, there's more and more concern, research, our direct experience, even the confessions from the engineers who design the technology and design all the software and the apps that run on it, that our devices and the software programs are designed to be addicting. And we know that now. And so to be careful that we don't cloud our minds with something that leads to heedlessness, to monitor our use of our devices, because what's happening is as we're on our devices, social media, texting, email, whatever, that overuse is changing the functioning of our brain. And that's what people are starting to pay attention to, that it's getting harder and harder for people to focus their attention for a long period of time. It's getting harder and harder for people to concentrate. And we know through mindfulness training how hard it is to get the mind to focus anyway. The mind is always wanting to jump from one thing to another. And when there's so much stimulation coming in on our devices, that's what the mind is being trained to do. And so the mind goes into a kind of brain fatigue or mind fog. And we also know that these devices are designed to hook our attention and keep us hooked, because every time we get that hit of dopamine, which is the neurotransmitter of pleasure and reward, and we get that every ping on a computer or every ping on the phone or like on the Facebook or whatever, we're strengthening that mesolimbic dopamine pathway of addiction. And so to be very, very careful, because otherwise we're losing our capacity to concentrate. We're losing our capacity to distinguish the relevant from the irrelevant. We're losing the capacity to say no, because it's the higher brain that regulates our impulses. And when it gets fatigued, it just stops saying no. So we can lose hours surfing the internet or being on social media, or we just have to be careful. Because what else is happening is we start losing other capacities as well. We lose the capacity for empathy, for caring about other people's emotions and understanding them, for even knowing that we should care about other people's emotions. We're losing the capacities for boredom because we want to be constantly stimulated. We're losing the capacity for solitude and self-reflection and self-awareness. So I am now constantly encouraging people, instead of getting their news or even connecting with people a lot through our devices, to spend time with real people in real time, having conversations about everything that's going on, so that we're informed and we support each other in whatever people are choosing to do. Everyone's going to have their own way of finding stewardship for the planet. But when I get together and talk with my friends about mindfulness in the schools, or climate change, or funding scientific research, or anything that's part of how we're all trying to cope and keep alive our own moral compass, our own vision for the future, those conversations strengthen us. That's what we're hardwired for. That's our neurobiology, to get strengthened and find safety and nourishment in connections with other people. Yeah. So I do read the news headlines, and then I make sure that I spend time with my friends, that I find refuge in Buddha Dharma Sangha, and that I really replenish that well, so that I find the courage and the calm to keep going.
Thank you. So, okay, now that's great. Now, if somebody is a bit more addicted than you, and they really want to break that addiction, but they just feel helpless about it, how would you suggest that they start to change that habit?
Well, so everything that I teach about resilience is about choice, and making the choices we need to make to keep our own nervous system calm, like hand on the heart, and to manage our own emotions like we can do with a practice like mindful self-compassion, and to stay connected with other people so that we have the strength of community and support of community, and to do the mindfulness practices that lead us to clarity and to wisdom. So it's about making those choices. And of course, part of the struggle with any addiction, it's interesting now that we've studied so much about substance abuse and then activities that might be addicting. And now we're moving into the digital technology realm, which they call, digital cocaine. The struggle with breaking any addiction is to be able to keep strong the parts of our mind or the functioning of our brain that can make choices. So that's why we make choices, honestly, to do the things that keep us healthy. Exercise, sleep, good food, hanging out with healthy brains, learning something new, and monitoring our choices, monitoring the choices that we make, and seeing whether they... So here's my mantra. I came up with this just a week or so ago that is, of course, ancient wisdom, and it's now what I check every morning, every day. Wisdom and loving connection. So I'm running my choices through that filter. Is what I'm doing going to lead to more wisdom and loving connection for myself, for the people that I care about, for the larger world? And when I have that filter, then I'm better able to make the choices. Is my use of my digital technology, is my, walking in nature or having dinner with a friend, is that contributing to wisdom and loving connection or not? And then that's what gives me the strength to face the very, very difficult issues that we're facing, to face the dread that we're facing.
So if I hear you, just having that framework of wisdom and loving connection, and seeing if this activity that you're immediately involved in supports that, it sounds like at some point you became clear that that was what you were wanting to go for. So that required a kind of clear decision and intention in your mind that would be your North Star, so to speak.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So that seems like it's an important part of the process, just getting clear on what you really want to create in your life, that initial highest intention that can hold everything.
So from years of study and years of practice, and there is a moral compass that develops when there's enough studying of the teachings of the Buddha, trying to put into practice the teachings of the Dharma, being in a sangha of like-minded, like-hearted people. And so to develop through the mindfulness training choices about where I focus my attention, where I focus my mind, choices about doing a loving kindness practice, doing a compassion practice, cultivating a gratitude practice. As I get more experience making choices, even at the simplest level, that strengthens my intention to be conscious of the choices that I'm making. And then at the largest level, I'm really trying to live in alignment with those values, with that moral compass. So then I'm checking, I'm monitoring. Are the choices I'm making in alignment with my values or not? Because if they're not, it won't work. And if they are, then I have strength and a sense of empowerment and a sense of confidence to do whatever I believe is the right thing to do.
Mm-hmm. And that seems to come down to choosing what's truly good for you, instead of the quick hit of what might feel good, but more what really is good. I'm just remembering growing up, maybe you heard this too, but my family saying, if you know what's good for you, you'll do such and such. But there's really wisdom in saying it with a loving way. Oh, if I know what's good for me, and really choose a deeper kind of well-being than the quick hit, that radically affects all of our other choices.
So we know that dopamine is the neurotransmitter of pleasure and reward. It's important to maintain motivation. There's a lot of joy when we're actually active and creative and productive in the world. We know that oxytocin is the neurotransmitter of safety and trust. of belonging. And so that's also very, very important for a sense of well-being. And serotonin is the neurotransmitter of contentment and tranquility, which is what leans us more into equanimity. So to pay attention, I mean, you know, I pay attention to where I have a hit of dopamine from presenting ideas well in a workshop and people respond. I have a sense of where I'm getting that sense of oxytocin, the safety and trust, when I have real connections with people. There's a resonance going back and forth. And I pay attention to where there's more serotonin, there's more calm, equanimity, tranquility, and from there is where I can make my wise choices. So it's monitoring and choosing how to keep that balance and having a sense of what I remember once in a day long at Spirit Rock. And it was Anna Douglas talking about how one day she had this experience. She just wasn't quite sure what it was. She couldn't quite put her finger on it. And finally she said, "Oh, this is calm." And it was so startling so it's very, very important that we know what the experience of calm feels like, that we know what experiences of connection feel like, and clarity feels like, and courage feels like, so that we know when we're acting from those principles or experiences and when we're not, and make a choice about it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And that's very much what I try to communicate in the Joy course that I teach, that teaching on noticing wholesome states, and when they arise, this is straight out of Buddhist teachings, when they arise, to not miss them, and to turn your attention not only on knowing, oh, I'm feeling pretty good right now, but to notice, oh, this is what it feels like to feel good, and turn your mindful awareness to your internal experience, and that seems to deepen and give you greater access to those states.
And so I'm glad we're having this conversation, actually. So when we can cultivate the wholesome within and let go of the unwholesome, and we have a sense of our own inner peace and equanimity within, then we're much more able to attune to what's wholesome or unwholesome in our larger society. And we have quicker reactions to what's wholesome and what's unwholesome. And then we know what kind of choices we might have to make to cultivate the wholesome and let go of or get rid of the unwholesome at a larger scale. And it's important, I think, to have that sense of direction. These days, it is so easy to feel overwhelmed and confused and frightened. That's being done to us deliberately. And so to be able to come to a place of calm and equanimity within, and be able to, as Howard Thurman says, look out on life with quiet eyes, and be able to see the larger picture again with quiet eyes. And from there, from that sense of inner peace and safety and equanimity, we can begin to discern what wise action might be. So I think it's being bombarded. There's many, many things that are so frightening right now. Mm-hmm. Coming inside to that deeper place of calm, peace, equanimity, and wisdom, and from that coming back out and deciding what's in alignment with our values and where we think we can be effective to create changes in the larger fabric.
Mm-hmm. Lovely. Well, and could you speak a little bit more just about that last piece from after we've connected with the calm and get clear on a wise choice, and moving from that clarity to the manifestation in action, just how to overcome, any thoughts you have on overcoming the inertia of knowing, oh, this would be good to do, to actually putting yourself in motion in some way. Because I find that many people, and I see this in myself, have thoughts of, oh, I know this would be good to do, but somehow the inertia can often prevent that feeling of engagement that actually is more enlivening than just knowing, oh, this would be good for me to do. This is something that I've been more and more focusing in for myself as well, which is one of the reasons, say, why I decided to do this series, because I thought, well, what can I do? What would I like to do, and what do I have the opportunity to do? Oh, this is one contribution that I could make, and I'm looking at other contributions so that hopefully people can find out for themselves what their gifts or opportunities are, and put them into action. So that's where the question is coming from.
So, sometimes I really do treasure quotes that have pith wisdom. And here's another one that I just came across recently. It's from the Talmud. Do not be daunted by the enormity of the world's grief. Do justly now. Love mercy now. Walk humbly now. You are not obligated to complete the work, but neither are you free to abandon it. So when we try to find our way of taking a step forward, I just thought of this one too. My mind works like this sometimes. Helen Keller says, I long to do great and noble deeds, but the world's safety is pushed along also by the honest shoves of each honest worker. Tiny little movements in the right direction. And so I teach a practice of do one scary thing a day. Because when we can train the brain to take that, not just inertia, but that signal anxiety, oh, I don't think I should be doing this. When we can train the brain to meet the inertia or meet the signal anxiety with an action, it moves the brain into action. And we train ourselves to respond rather than staying inert or staying scared. And to do something small and little at first is fine. It's just fine, because that's how the world changes. When we take wise action from a full and loving heart with our deepest intention to make a difference, it makes a difference. Every choice has an impact. And so we keep doing the scary thing or the uncomfortable thing or the uncertain thing. Dr. Martin Luther King said, faith is taking the first step without seeing the whole staircase. So you take the first step and then another and then another. And then you join in with other people who are taking their steps and another and another. And pretty soon you're in motion and you kind of wonder how you got there. But it was because you made that first initial choice, that first initial step.
Mm-hmm. So, what you're saying, there's a few things in what you're saying. One is that you don't have to be overwhelmed by the enormity of the task and feel you have to save the world, that you do something that just gets you in motion. And as Angela Sarian used to say, action absorbs anxiety.
Right.
And that in itself not only relieves the anxiety and gives you a sense of contribution, but that in itself is also magnetizing and inspiring to others who might want to play with you or join you, or you join some others who are doing something. And I always find that when you're doing something with others in a concerted action of goodwill, there's a kind of multiplication of courage, as Nelson Mandela has said. So taking that first step and doing it as something that you're doing to benefit yourself.
So for me to be honest here, when I feel overwhelmed and that happens, I will go to hand on the heart, may I be kind to myself in this moment. I go to the mindful self-compassion practice, which helps bring me out of overwhelm into a different perspective, into a different state within my own being. And I can come back to that equanimity. So there is overwhelm, there is startle, there's distress, there's despair. And I keep doing that practice to come out of that difficult state into a state that's more open and that can remember, well, all I have to do is one small thing with integrity, and that will get me going, and that's enough.
Mm-hmm. Lovely, lovely. Just share in recent days, Jane and I have been looking at what we can do, particularly what's needed these days, and besides doing this series, one thing that she's gotten into that I'm going to be joining her is seeing the importance of getting out the vote and giving people as much voice as possible. So I am going to be stretching myself and going to some groups that are actively engaging in doing that. In areas other than Berkeley. I live in Berkeley. I don't have to wonder how voting is going to be going in this district, but to really go to places where there might be a number of people who don't feel the voice counts, even, so that they aren't motivated to. But these days, giving voice to people who really care, who haven't felt they have a voice, I think is going to be really important in this coming year. So I'm stretching myself that way and just kind of seeing, oh, well, what'll this be like? I know it'll feel good, at least, that I've done something.
So as you stretch in that direction and other people stretch in other directions, I know a lot of what I try to do is strengthen the capacities of resilience and response flexibility in people, so that whatever they choose to do, whatever cause they choose to pick up, or however they decide to be stewards for the planet, they have the strength within to be flexible and to learn and to grow in that doing, in that action in the larger world. Because there are things that we learn from our mindfulness practice and our compassion practice and our resilience training. There are things we learn that help keep us steady, that keep us in that inner equanimity and that external motivation, so that we continue acting and being alive. So I quoted Howard Thurman earlier, and here's another one. Mm-hmm. Don't ask what you should do in the world. Do what brings you fully alive, because what the world needs is people who are fully alive.
Yeah, I love that quote.
Yeah. Uh-huh. So from deep within, and it just comes out and spreads.
Mm-hmm. So, and even just talking about this together, orienting towards aliveness, engagement, possibilities. There's an internal experience that I'm feeling that is more uplifting, and that I really find important to cultivate. Just noticing how my energy, whether it's imploded and contracting or open and expansive, and having that much more to give from that place. So it makes. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Yeah.
I'm just saying. So we're, in a sense, we're cultivating our oxytocin. We're cultivating the oxytocin, the connection and the resonance, and the dopamine, the motivation, the wanting to be alive, and the serotonin, the equanimity, the contentment. And, when we can integrate all three of those, then more likely we're going to be effective.
Mm-hmm. So there's just the reorientation towards the possibilities.
Right, right.
So it makes me ask ask of you, what do you hold as the most positive vision of what the future can hold? Because I find that having some idea, whether or not it turns out just the way we want, who knows? But to have a positive vision helps inspire me and often many human beings to want to work towards that vision. As Joanna Macy talks about, active hope, having a positive vision and doing what you can to bring that about without the report card or timetable. So I want to ask you, what do you see as your most positive vision from where we are now to the possibilities of what the future can hold?
So I'll say a couple of things in preface to that. One is what I'm noticing these days is a tremendous nostalgia for the Obama administration. There's a lot of books and films and articles and interviews coming out. And I think at a political level, anyway, we want to remember what intelligence and integrity and empathy look like in that realm, because that's certainly part of the vision. There's also the Buddhist teachings about impermanence and how everything in transient existence comes and goes. And I remember long before I ever heard of Buddhism or impermanence, I was in the 7th grade, and there was a chart on the wall of the classroom that had sort of a timeline of the various empires of history. And so you could see in a visual way how empires literally come and go. And that's just the nature of human history. And so I mentioned that to my teacher. I was 12 years old, and she said, and I said, oh, well, that means that America won't be around forever either. And she didn't slap me, but she really scolded me for having a treasonous thought like that. But the truth is, our society and our culture is changing. That's been the history of history. And so many people have had to survive at least as difficult dilemmas as we're surviving now. I mean, slavery and oppression and war and famine and plague and oppressive governments and, World War II. I mean, people have survived so much already. So sometimes I wonder how we come so far. I think my vision isn't necessarily a picture. It's really more a path. It's my wisdom and loving connection, moment by moment, day by day. And I really have to count on other people having a similar enough vision, that we're all coming from that wiser heart and that compassionate heart, that if enough of us have that vision of what real health and real connection and real truth is, that we'll be able in our own way, each of us, to be able to, my words are experience, embody, and express. We bring that into life in this world. And if enough of us do that moment by moment, day by day, year by year, then that creates a vision, or that fulfills the vision of peace, love, trust, kindness, compassion, all of our Brahma-viharas, all of our paramitas. We can embody that vision. We can embody that vision enough that it begins to be the air that we breathe and where we live. I guess that's my vision. Mm-hmm. Enough of us together can do that.
And do you? Is there an actual believing in that possibility?
It's what I experience. It's what I experience. And I trust that experience, that this sense of peace, aliveness, joy, connection, common humanity, I experience it. So I trust that that is what's possible, that is the larger vision.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Great, thank you. Yeah, I'm right with you. just seeing in this race between fear and consciousness that consciousness is much stronger than fear in the long run, and that as much fear as there is in the world, there's never been as much consciousness, and I'm putting my money on that and doing what we can to help bring that about.
You know, consciousness is always larger than fear, and consciousness is also always larger than our personal self. And so I think, I'm really thinking out loud with you here. I really think I trust deeply, completely, implicitly, that larger consciousness. I'll do my best, I'll show up and I'll do my part, but I really trust that larger consciousness that will hold everything. And whether this government survives, this country survives, this species survives, this planet survives, I really, really trust that larger consciousness. And when we tune into it, when we tap into it, then we get empowered to do the things that will save the day.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Well, it's so good to spend some time and see how your mind works and your good heart works, and your knowledge of how the human organism works. It's really a pleasure to hang out, as it always has been.
You know, it's always a pleasure. It is always a pleasure to talk with you, James. And I'm actually glad that we had a conversation, the back and forth, because that's where new ideas and new energy and new hope can come from, is when people talk about what's important and what's necessary. So thank you for the privilege of being part of that.
Well, glad you're around to talk with. Keep on talking and touching people, and hope we keep on continue our conversations for many years to come.
I hope so too. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Linda.